I think we can all agree that equality is a good thing. But my question is it sufficient? Equality means equal rights within what exists. But what if what exists is not that good? So you can look at a whole range of social issues and see that there have been big advances in the last few decades for women, black and ethnic minority people, people with disabilities, lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender people. That's all fantastic. But it's all been within the framework of the prevailing status quo. And I would suggest that in many respects that status quo is not very good at all, and that we really need an agenda beyond equality. So to give you an example, we've had formal equality for women and black people for decades, yet there is still racism and still misogyny. Women have made great progress, but still on average their earnings is only about 15% below that of men. You look at women's advancement at the higher echelons of social institutions, still there is massive underrepresentation of women. Likewise with black and ethnic minority communities, again, all the official and formal discriminations have been abolished and are protected against, but still we see black and Asian people underrepresented in senior positions, higher rates of poverty, bad housing, poor outcomes in terms of healthcare and so on. So what I'm saying is equality is right, but we need something more. We need to go beyond equality to reframe the issue in a new way.
How do we apply that concept then to the LGBTQ plus community, or women, or black and minority ethnic groups, for example?
Well, you mentioned about minorities. I don't think this is a minority issue. We live in a society which is essentially an economic dictatorship. The very rich and powerful hold all the votes. They have all the power to make all the key decisions in both private enterprises and in public institutions like the National Health Service and local councils. It means that the vast majority of employees are frozen out of economic decision making. So of course it's good that we have better health and safety regulations. We've got the safety net of unemployment benefit for those who become jobless, etc. But we really need to think about changing the economic structures of society to give the average person a stakehold in the place where they work. And I would like to see, for example, employee and consumer directors on the boards of both public and private institutions, where they can have a direct input into how the enterprise works, where they can have access to the corporate information, where they can blow the whistle when bad things are happening.
When you look at movements like the Me Too movement, which has become the Time's Up movement now, is that going far enough? Have they got the right objectives at this time, do you think?
I think these movements precisely show why equality has not been sufficient. Women have had legal equality and protection for decades, but quite clearly that has not been sufficient. And these movements are blowing the whistle on a whole layer of sexual abuse and harassment that has been ignored for far too long, and which has not been addressed through the mechanisms of formal legal equality. So law reform is important, but it doesn't go far enough. We have to also change the culture, people's attitudes, values, mentalities, the way they treat other people in day-to-day situations. So again, it shows that mere equality in law is not sufficient.
As with most human rights issues, you're kind of one step ahead of the pack here, Peter, aren't you? Do you think society is ready to approach this next stage of the journey, or because we're just now going through this watershed moment and watching the Me Too campaign gather momentum? So are we ready for the next stage yet?
I think people are, but it means we have to reframe the issue beyond equality. Every social movement in my lifetime has always been premised on the mantra of equality. And, I've supported that because I'm against discrimination, and ending discrimination has been a very important thing for millions of people in our society. But quite clearly, we have to go the extra step. We have to look beyond mere formal legal equality to changing systems, structures, institutions, and interpersonal relations so that the formal legal equality can be reflected in day-to-day life, in the way individuals are treated. And this is ultimately about you and me and all of us. It's about making life better for all of us, saying that what exists is not good enough. It could be better. We want to change society from what it is to what it could be. And if we do that, everyone will gain. Let's change the law, which for the most part we have already done, but let's also change the culture. And the way we change the culture, there's two major avenues I see. The first is through the media. The media is the main means of social communication, both mainstream media and social media. That's where people get their ideas from. We need to ensure that media is less prejudiced, more inclusive, more embracing of people who are different, more open to people of different cultures and backgrounds and ideas. And then also we need to look at the issue of education. I've argued for many years that equality and diversity lessons should be a mandatory part of the school curriculum. And I say that because no child is born prejudiced. That's learned behavior. People become prejudiced because of the bad influences of their parents or other adults around them, or their peers at school or in the neighborhood. If we can challenge that from an early age in school, I think we'll end up with a society that's more open and tolerant and inclusive, and that's a kinder, gentler society which I want to live in.
You're talking about perhaps unpicking a considerable number of social constructs and cultural behaviours that have been part of our very DNA, part of our fabric as a society for millennia. So is there any danger in trying to unpick those social constructs, particularly when many of them exist to try and instill a decent moral framework in our society?
Well, I think this is all about instilling a good moral framework. It's about actually extending that moral framework to include other people who traditionally have not been part of it, or extending it in new ways that expand our horizon of moral empathy. I'd like to see a society where everyone felt included and valued, where everyone had equal opportunities and equal outcomes, more or less. I know it can't be perfect. You can't have exactly equal outcomes all the time, but I think that
some of it's got to be driven from the individual as well. It's not all about society, all about social constructs, is it? One has to feel motivated to achieve it all.
You're absolutely right, but I do think we can achieve more equal outcomes than we currently do on a whole range of issues, from race to women to LGBT people to those with disabilities and lots.